Hello and welcome to this repair tutorial, and today we're going to look at a Arcam and the model number is Alpha 8R. In terms of general specifications, power output is 50 watts per channel into 8 ohms, but this will increase to 100 watts per channel if you connect 4 ohm speakers. Frequency response is 20 Hz to 20 kHz, and then total harmonic distortion is 0.01%. Input sensitivity is 3 millivolts for your moving magnet type cartridge. But this input is switchable, so you can change it then to a line input where your impedance then is 275 millivolts. The amplifier also has a pre-amplifier output of 540 millivolts, enabling you then to connect it to other power amplifiers if you so wish. And then speaker impedance ranges from 4 ohms to 16 ohms. And then here, overall dimensions, height is 85 by a width of 430 with a depth of 330. And then weight comes in at 4.5 kilograms. For this particular amplifier in this repair tutorial, it didn't have the rear function switch, which is termed as the processor input, just for clarification. And then here, when we take an aerial view, you can see on the left hand side is the toroidal transformer, power input socket, and then you have 2 Mosfets for each channel, which is bolted then to the vertical heat sinks. The foam material is sitting on top of the smoothing capacitors, and then as you look towards where the multimeter is, you can see the individual switches both for input selection, also your balance, tone and bass controls, also where you can select the secondary set of speakers, and then you also have the direct mode push button as well to bypass the tone control circuits, as well as your headphone socket. You'll also see that the volume control has the motor at the rear, but all of the other inputs are mechanically switched via the rotary switch on the front. And then when we look from the rear, you can see here the 4 sets of speaker terminals, SP1 direct and then SP2 is switched. Just for clarification on what we mean by that. What it simply refers to is if you connect your headphones, if it's termed as the switched outputs, what that means is as soon as you insert them, it will mute the external speakers. If they are unswitched, then the audio will not be muted and you'll hear it both through your headphones and also the connected speakers. And then you can see just to the right hand side, just on the rear panel, there's a small opening, and that's where you can insert maybe a matchstick, and then you can then operate the latch in push button to select between the moving magnet type input or line input. And then here what we've done is we've just removed the front fascia, and then we want to gain access then to get the main circuit board out of the chassis. So you have a series of screws, and I'll put a link in the description below for other tutorials, so I'll not go through that again, just how you will dismantle the amplifier. But what you're looking to do here is really a systematic approach. There are certain things that you have to undertake because they are linked to the age of the amplifier, and we'll just step through those now. The first one is that when you flip over the circuit board to get to the solder side, what I've done here is I've just drawn a series of circles around key areas that you need to focus on. So if we work from left to right, you can see that these are the input RCA sockets, and you will always find breaks around some of the contacts. The next are the Mosfets and also the speaker terminals. Really a lack of soldering in some cases, and sometimes you can get the amplifier where it just sticks into protection mode because of dry joints on the output Mosfets. And then on the Euro input socket, there's always cracking around there. And then as we move towards the multimeter, the first one on the right hand side at the front is the headphone socket, and again you'll find dry solder joints there. And then also on the bass, treble and balance controls, also the selection switches, and then the most important one is the input selector switch, which we'll come to in a moment. And then the one which is sort of not quite in the center but to the left, these are the plus or minus 15 volt regulators, always dry joints on those. So again, just scan the board, resolder all of the connections, and then that eliminates any issue associated with that. And then here what we're doing is we're looking directly down onto this Omron relay. It's small in terms of physical size, but this is actually the speaker protection relay and readily available, so I don't look to try and dismantle it, I just change it out. When you get issues with intermittent loss of sound and distortion and all of these different things, with these Arcam series, and this could be the Arcam 7, Arcam 8, it's a multitude of different issues. So you can't just target maybe just replacing the speaker protection relay, because that's only going to take care of one potential issue. If you do all of this work, then you'll be rewarded then with an amplifier which is as good as when it left the factory, but also as well it has that longevity. You're not going to get any issues in the near future where you say, oh, it seems to have developed the same fault as what I was seeing before. And then the other very common one is what you see here, and we've covered this in so many tutorials. This is the input selection switch, and you do need to desolder it. Often you'll find dry solder joints around the solder pins, but once it's been removed, you can just use a pair of small side cutters and then you can disassemble the switch. So this is the switch now before cleaning. So what you can see is there is oxidization there on the switching contacts and then also on the switch mechanism. So what you need to do is just to take a fiberglass pencil, also use some high quality switch cleaner, in my case it's De-Oxit D5, and I just spray it onto there. So you're doing really two things. The first one is that there's lubricating grease which is on there and that has dried out. So that forms like an insulator, creating these intermittent switching contacts or this poor sound quality. And also as well, because there is air, over time these contacts now become oxidized. So the fiberglass pencil will take care of it. The switch cleaner will remove any of this old residual grease. And then this photograph is simply showing you the switch after cleaning, and you can see the contacts now are very, very bright. What I would always advise you not to do is take something more abrasive than a fiberglass pencil. You don't want to go in there maybe with sandpaper because you're going to damage those contacts. Just lightly brushing them with a fiberglass pencil will clean them, and you'll have no concerns where maybe the wafers have become damaged. And then once the switch is refitted after reassemble, then what you can see here is the adjustments that you need to make. Now for this amplifier there's no separate DC offset, but what you will need to do is to adjust the bias setting for the output Mosfets. And then you can then see here that we will need to adjust RV101, no speakers connected, no inputs connected, tone, bass and balance control at midpoint, volume control at minimum, and then leaving the amplifier to warm up for about 20 minutes. And then all I simply do is make the adjustment, and I'm just looking for a range of 2.3 millivolts to about 2.8. Commonly what you will find is if these amplifiers have never been serviced before and they come to you, normally the millivoltage is running slightly higher than 2.8, so it's just a case of just bringing it down. I've never seen an amplifier where it's excessively high, but if you say, okay, it seems to be running a little bit warm with no speakers connected, commonly it's associated with the bias setting. And then once the adjustment has been made on both the left and then the right hand channel, as always, you just need to leave the amplifier under test, probably for about 4 hours. In this case, there was no issues. And then here what you can see is just an aerial shot showing the amplifier after all of the work has now been completed. For this particular customer, the customer didn't have the original remote control. They are available from time to time on auction websites, but I think whenever I've looked, some of the prices which are being charged are probably in the order of, in the UK, 30 to 40 pounds, which just makes no sense whatsoever unless you've set your heart on a dedicated original remote. But you can pick up generic remote controls at a reasonable price, and they're readily available. They are advertised. And then here, just before we sort of close out, you can see again the Omron speaker relay, and I'll put the part number in the description for the video. And then once the amplifier had completed all of its tests, also tested them with the generic remote control, then it was just simply cleaned, boxed up, and then returned back to the customer. So that brings us to the end of this repair tutorial, and if you need any help, guidance or assistance, by all means email audioamplifierservicing@aol.com, and I'll be more than happy to come back to you and provide any support that you may require. So until the next time, I wish you all the very best. Cheers and bye-bye.